he served as the Secretary Indian Science Writers Association during 1997 to 1999, and in his journalist career, he has gone extensively to US, Australia, China, Federal Republic of Germany, and many other countries. In 2001, the Hindu brought him back to Hyderabad to head the business line as the chief bureau. In his longest serving in the post, he has led the team that covered the Satyam scam, separate Telangana agitation, elections, and the IT growth and emergence of Cyberabad. His writings have been published in 2 coffee tables on Indian science brought out from London. He has done many programs on radio, TV, participated in panel discussions. He moderated programs on budget, investor meet, careers, etc. for the business line. He co-authored the book Made in Hyderabad, Stories of Entrepreneurs from Hyderabad in 2019. Since March 2020, he became an independent journalist and a freelance writer based out of Hyderabad. He is the honorary advisor to the Hyderabad Management Association from June 2020. He is a consultant to the Indian School of Business at present. Sir, we heartily welcome you for this as a resource person to give your session. Thank you.
I think it's just about noon time. Very good afternoon, my dear young students. My teacher, Professor P.L. Visweshwar Rao, my colleague in a way, Professor Stevenson. I also met a few defense professionals who were keen on learning communication, and I think bringing into public forum, what Indian defense, what are the strategies, how, defense helps, and what are the technologies that are going to come into public, and also knowledge about it. And also, I see Janavigyan Vedika people who have tried in the last, I think, 3 decades to demystify many of the superstitions in society. And I had an opportunity also to cover some of their very interesting arguments that brought some sanity, some logic in science thinking. For example, the popular event in Hyderabad every June 8th is the fish medicine. There is a popular event on June 8th called Mrugasira Karte, where a family from Hyderabad, they would administer a fish, and they would claim that asthma is treated. For many years, we used to see thousands of people from across the country coming and taking that fish medicine and claiming that, they are. So this Janavigyan Vedika did lot of explanation, and in a way broke that superstition and said, no, the fish does not do, nor the medicine that they are putting, but the real story behind that entire thing being more a belief than science. So that is what the organization has done, going to many places and explaining. So that's how science popularization, removing superstitions and all have been tried over a period of time. I'm very happy to see some of them. And also today I'm quite delighted to be in the Osmania University, where I am an alumnus. And coincidentally, as the director of NIT said, he was a student 40 years ago. I was also a student here 40 years ago, completing my journalism in Osmania in BCJ 91-92 batch. And also, I would like to tell the NIT, National Institute of Technology, which was the regional engineering college when I went for the first time. That was during the mid 1980s. And I would like to tell the audience, I think if anybody has visited the Ramappa temple, has anybody gone to the Ramappa temple in Warangal, Mulugu? Not you, students. Yeah, I see some hands. Now, Thousand Pillar Temple is in Warangal town, Warangal city. Okay. What is the great significance? Why was it in the news? Under the sand. All, I think, constructions are in ground sand only, no? Anyway, what is the it got global recognition for UNESCO recognition. Now, the Regional Engineering College, Warangal Civil Engineering Department, during that time, explained the temple was, collapsing. If you see the Thousand Pillar Temple also, it was collapsing. Now there is a reconstruction and all that. So the reasons for the collapse of these pillars was what the Civil Engineering Department during the investigation and their study showed, that there were some water channels running close to the Ramappa temple. And because of that loose sand, the pillars were all collapsing like a pack of cards. If you put, they'll all collapse like this. So the Thousand Pillar Temple also, similar thing happened, and even in Ramappa. So based on their recommendations and scientific study, the Ramappa temple has been, completely, reconstructed wherever necessary. And in 2021, it got the World UNESCO Heritage Tag. So that's what, science, understanding of technology and utilization will do to, improve whatever heritage we have, monuments, or, this is one example, and I was very happy to have visited and been part of writing that story as a journalist. So today in this context, I'm really happy to be associated both the NIT, Osmania University, and as Lakshma Reddy, whom I met today, I've been third time lucky in a way. So he's been asking me to come to Warangal. I missed. Then last month there was a seminar. Again I missed. So today I somehow managed to be here and get an opportunity to interact with all of you, listen to you. And before that, I have tried to put my presentation, say for half an hour, into three broad segments. One is I want to do a small quiz, because students need to know. They're quite excited about a lot of data, a lot of information. They are all on gadgets and WhatsApp, so you are flooded with information. So I would like to do a small quiz. Then I will give you three examples based from the 1980s, 2020, future. One past, one present, and one future, on how to use and how to communicate science and technology. So this is what I'll do in the next half an hour. Before becoming too serious, I would like to share a small joke in science. All of you must have heard about George W. Bush, the US president, and he was not very well known to be recognizing good science or knowing people and so on. So once somebody told him about Atal Bihari Vajpayee, so he said, "Who is he?" So this man, there is a popular joke in one of the newspaper there. Now, this is how it goes. In the doctors in the United States did a brain scan on George W. Bush. Now, while explaining the results, they said, President Bush, your brain has two sides. So he said, that's normal, isn't it? All brains have two sides. Now the doctor said, the scan shows that there is very little right, that is RIGHT, on the left side of your brain. And there is nothing left, LEFT, on the right side. So if you look at science, the understanding of neurologists, neuroscientists, is that they divide the brain into the two hemispheres. The right side does some functions, the left side does some functions. So therefore, the understanding of brain depends on the functionalities. So you should have the right things on the right side and the more important things perhaps on the left side. We do not know. So there are a lot of interesting science going on. So the quiz part is, please raise your hands and tell me what the context is in the last 1 month of events I have looked at. Now, Nobel Prizes were given in October. Tell me the laws in the field of science and technology. Several Indians have won Nobel Prizes. Now, which Indian has won a Nobel Prize for his work in India and studied in India, lived in India, and also died in India? He is the only person. Oh, I think C.V. Raman. I think very good. Now, the second is, there is an international scientist. Okay. Now, he lived in India, worked in India, won a Nobel Prize for his work that was done in India. Can you guess? Huh? Amartya Sen. No, I think I want students to tell. Nobel laureate in, science, medicine. No?
Which field, sir? Which field?
Medicine. Any student? But otherwise, I heard the answer already. Somebody answered it. Yeah. Who? Ronald Ross. But why Guntur? Not in Guntur. No, in fact, very close to the university in Begumpet, there is one Ronald Ross Institute of Parasitology, which the Osmania University actually runs. I don't know, I think they're not running it because the last time I saw there were some cows and buffaloes there. So I think university has to take care of it. Now the third, I think for all those who see OTT and film, two movies have come recently. One is the Rocket Boys. The more popular OTT series called Rocket Boys. Can you tell me who are the Rocket Boys on whom the movie was made? Okay, I think very good on OTT and Netflix and all. I think you're quite good. Okay. Now, the fourth is, very recently we had the launch of the GSLV and India became a big, made a big statement saying that we have arrived in launching satellites or payloads of higher weightage into space. Now, you must have heard of Chandrayaan, that is a moon mission, Mangalyaan, mission to Mars. Now, Gaganyaan. No, Gaganyaan. Okay. Now, tell me, what is the probe to the sun called? Suryaan. Huh? No, it's all not rhyming. So, yeah. Anybody? Student first? No. Yeah, I think you're somewhere on the way. Okay, it's Aditya L1. Now, last, thing is, during COVID, two very common words were used, DNA and mRNA. DNA, and mRNA. Okay. Now, tell me what is mRNA? No, I think not students should tell. Huh? Messenger? That is the correct answer. RNA, DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid. Okay. Now, what came out of this mRNA? Can any of the students? Very good. So I think you're all quite conversant, quite update on science information, the latest developments and so on. So now let me take you to the main, what I really wanted to share today with you about popularizing science, about reporting on science, becoming a science journalist, or if you want to build a career in writing on science, how would you look at this as a opportunity, as a career? Is it worth taking up science writing? Is it lucrative? Should you specialize? Will you get a story on front page? Will you not? There are many things that perhaps students here are confronted with. Would you like to become a science journalist? How many of you would like to become a science journalist or specialize in science writing? Please raise your hand. Does science excite you? I think you can raise your hand a bit higher because we are going higher in space now. Yeah, good. So now, recently I met the director of one of the national institutions in Hyderabad. Now, I was a bit surprised. He said, in Hyderabad, can anybody guess how many institutions of national, international, and state importance are there dealing with science and technology? Any guess? Like, Osmania University also has some departments. You have NGRI here, laboratories. Any guess from anybody? 10. Huh? 10. 10. Anybody there? 52. 100. Oh, come on. No, you'll be shocked. The answer is 200. So there are 200 institutions doing science and technology work. There are laboratories of CSIR, there are defense laboratories, there are space institutions, there are university research institutions, there are corporate R&D centers, there are multinational institutions, there are institutions like ICRISAT, there are 8 agricultural institutions. So you look at the entire universe of international, national, and then you have state agriculture institutions, state center for science. So there are 200. And for your information, when I started writing on science as a specialization, because I was in Hyderabad, I had listed 110 in 1985. So now there are 200. So if, ladies and gentlemen, anybody wants to write on science, this is a big opportunity. And I have been arguing with all my friends that Hyderabad should be the science capital of India. So you have a lot of scope to do stories. Now let me come to the way science should be written or not written, or how you should approach. One of the interesting examples that I would love to quote and explain is, a story that broke out in 1995, although some of you might not have been born, but this is a story that is momentous in Indian science. There was a guy called Ramar Pillai. Has anybody heard? No, milk. No. Milk is Ganesha drinking milk.
From normal water or something, he made some petrol or something. If you are not wrong. Something to do with engine fuel or something.
Yes, Ramar Pillai and petrol, correct. So this is guy in Tamil Nadu, Now, he comes from a very underprivileged background. He has not studied much. Now, he one day came to Delhi. At that time, I was also a journalist working in Delhi. Now, he went to the Department of Science and Technology there and then told the secretary that, I have gathered these, herbs and extracts of plants from Eastern Ghats. Now, I have done my own process and produced petrol. Okay. Now, the story is, there are many claims. People, claim a lot of things. But this story, clicked because there was a PTI journalist in Delhi who was also called, I think, immediately after this explanation by this Ramar Pillai. And this PTI journalist was a doctorate. Okay. He was himself nearly a scientist and a science writer. So he thought, this is a wonderful story because if you look at the 1990s, the economic reforms were on, and India was developing, but the biggest problem for our or driving our economy was the deficiency in oil. India had to produce, oil or import. So we used to import petroleum from the Gulf, Russia, and so on, and our oil bill was very, very high. So here is a chap who's saying, I'll produce petrol from herbs. So the story was written in a way that, the chap who's hardly studied has produced a process which gives petrol, which will be cheap. Now, the entire thing was, became, as in the modern WhatsApp and all, we say viral. Because PTI put out this story, it was published in every publication. And next day, I think many people who read it were very happy that here is a solution to India's problems of petrol. Now, there were definitely skeptics who, thought this will not be very true. So, in fact, all of us had gone next day and asked. So, this chap explained, whatever that process. So, we were not convinced. So, we went to the IIT Delhi, a chemistry professor. Now, he said, I have also heard, but I know certain chemical reactions, but this entire explanation looks like new chemistry, so I can't explain. So the skepticism on this story started. Then there is a institution called Indian Institute of Petroleum in Dehradun. Now they deal in, petroleum products, processes and so on. So we talked to the director. He said, you come to my institution, I'll show you at least 30 plants whose extracts will provide some or produce some oil. Okay, so producing oil or producing some liquid from any extract is not the issue, but is it commercially viable? That is the second question. So you can produce some oil from some plants and then, use it for, lighting or, lamp or whatever you want, you can do. Many of us can do it. So the second doubt was whether it is commercially viable. Now, the third thing is, how do you scale it up? There are, in science, you should understand, there is a lab scale, that is gram scale, then kilogram scale, then you go into industrial scale. So if you do not go through all this, it's not a new discovery, invention, or practical. So the story turned into a issue of doubting. So what this chap said was he went off to Tamil Nadu and he refused to meet media people because he had to explain the process. So he said, no, I do not know, I cannot explain because I have not studied much. And he wanted to patent it so that nobody else will, copy it or something. So in a few days, what happened was it became a big story and newspapers started writing big stories about, how India, ordinary Indian has come up with a invention that can make India a superpower and so on. And there are other skeptics who said this is all very humbug, there is no explanation, there is no science, and so on. In fact, there's one article in one of the publications said, even Newton, Galileo, many of them were first not given any importance because people said what Galileo said was all wrong. Similarly, our Ramar Pillai is also not being encouraged. So there is a popular saying that it was Raman, and Ramanujam in Tamil Nadu. So the story took a political angle, and in Delhi, if you see during 1995-96, there was a united front government, a government which is a coalition of regional parties, or in some others would call it Kichdi. So the DMK from Tamil Nadu was one of the parties. So the DMK thought that some great invention from Tamil Nadu was being hushed or not given prominence in Delhi. So the DMK members, they put pressure on the government saying that the guy should be given DST, Department of Science Technology grant, so that he can quickly, scale up his process, patent it, and India will win. So we were all journalists, trying to write half knowledge, did not know what this new science was, then became skeptical, started questioning. And even in Hyderabad, there was one Dr. P.M. Bhargava, and there was one IAS officer. So you can look at how the story became a socio-scientific, political event. And there was a public demonstration in one of the colleges, I think Nizam College ground, where he was asked to produce the petrol. No, I think he did not come there, and Dr. Bhargava and I think VIGYAN Vedika perhaps was involved, where they showed this is not correct. But, they popularly, people were not ready to listen to him. The sympathy was mostly to this gentleman who was not being given opportunities. So the Department of Science and Technology formed a committee of scientists, technologists, and some academics, and asked this Ramar Pillai to demonstrate in front of them whether this process is real or he can create it. So he did his experiment, and finally it turned out that he just could not get all that cocktail of herbs and leaves to burn in that water and then transform into petrol. So he used some wax or some other substance which only converted into a liquid, but they did not turn into petrol. So the scientists proved that his entire story was not real. But the issue is that you can produce some liquid from herbs. Now, what happened was in this 1-2 months, the entire science writing, science popularization, science policy, everything came into play. And I feel it is an excellent example of how to look at science writing, science popularization, and how not to report on science. Because the story, the way it was written, is one good example of how to write a science story. Now, here is this person who comes from a very underprivileged background. He has not studied much. Now he is claiming something spectacular, and then he wants support so that he will create something very new. Now, as you see these OTT or masala movies, now the masala for a good story was there in his life and what he did. So first, the story was well written, But then, before writing a story, what should you do as a journalist, as a communicator? What questions should you ask? Is something I think journalism students are now learning. So this questioning nature, many of the journalists did not do at that time. We were overawed by the claim that here is an extract and you can produce petrol. So what we did was we were carried away by the story than questioning. So that is where we should be very careful when writing on science or science popularization, because science is peer reviewed and science is not anecdotal. Science is evidence based, science is research based, science should be published. It should not be anecdotal. Now, supposing there is a case where somebody has is not able to explain, like COVID vaccine. You do not know, everything is new. Now, what should be done by journalists and communicators is you should question it and ask some expert to validate or give a counter answer or raise questions to this claim, so that there is a second opinion on this story, so that there is some balance of what has been claimed. So that is the second learning. Now the third is, when you are communicating this story, the feature or the entire I think, no, sorry. No, this entire story had a context. Now, the context was that India was desperate for oil at that time, and therefore the story became very popular. So, when we are writing on science stories, the context also is very, very important. For example, you have this space build-up for India, launching the uh, heaviest payload satellite. Now, we are all tuned to reading about space. Now, if you write a story related to space, many people will read. Now, if the attention is or focus is on space, and you write a story on, say, Osmania University, chemistry department, doing something and, publish a paper, I think nobody will read. So what science communicators should do is to look at the context and write about that subject, so that more people will read. The third thing that appealed in this story is, there are a lot of papers, science, discoveries, science breakthroughs, which keep appearing in scientific journals. But most of it, we don't understand, because as journalists, as communicators, we are not reading or in tune with many of the science that is happening. So one of the things that this story appealed to many was because it related to our common daily activity. That is, this will help us drive our car, our planes can fly, whatever. So your life is impacted by what that discovery or invention claimed. So when you write a story in science to make it more popular, what you should do is relate that development to something common in your life, in our daily life. Otherwise, we will not understand. So you need to look at the science and relate it to something that is happening around you that impacts you. I'll tell you an example. There is one project which Russian scientists and Indian scientists worked on. They used magnetic waves, put a few people in vacuum, and then the magnetic waves were the head brain was exposed to the magnetic waves. Now they studied how the brain would behave when the head was in different directions and the magnetic waves were exposed to the brain. So they found that when in vacuum, the person would be most calm when the the magnetic waves were towards east, less towards north. So it varied. Now, how do you report this in a newspaper? How can you say, magnetic waves when impinged on the brain, the person is more at peace? Correct. So, yeah. So what, I did at that time was, we are all told by our grandmothers, don't sleep with your head to the north. So there is no rationale, no understand, they never told us why you should not sleep with your head towards the north. Okay. So in this study, they showed that when the person is sleeping and the magnetic waves are impinged on his brain in the north direction, he was most restless. Okay, so what we did in our story, we said the grandma's saying that don't sleep with your head to the north has been proved by modern scientific experiments, which showed the reason for this popular grandma's tale. So that's how you grab the attention of the reader. After that, you can write, the analysis, the result of the scientific study, who have done the scientific study, and so on. So the main thing that you need to do is relate scientific discoveries, scientific inventions, science papers to common day-to-day, activities. So in this case also, that is what happened, because everybody is using petrol. So all of us got excited about this story. The next thing is, how do you ensure that the claims are correct or wrong? In Indian context, I think we are having a lot of trouble because a lot of scientists also keep talking, especially if you look at Indian Science Congress meetings, many claims are made by scientists without having published the paper in a scientific journal. So there is a system of, asking the scientist where he or she has published the work. Before you write a story, I think you should ask them whether it is published. And in today's context, earlier you had some scientific journals like Nature, Lancet, Science. In India, you have Current Science. Some of these magazines where the papers are published. So you are sure that it has been peer reviewed, and then you can, write based on a peer reviewed work. So the important thing is to ensure that the research study is published in a scientific paper. And these days, since technology is advanced, you have television, online publications. There are online publications which allow scientific studies to be published. So you can publish there, and then later on it gets into print. So these are some of the things that I would urge you to look at when you're reporting on science and technology, so that the story is credible, story is simple, story is relatable to some of your understanding and has an impact. Now, will this story get front page or not is something, again, I think journalists, especially the restless young people of today, are worried about. Will the story come on page one? Will it get lot of eyeballs or page views or whatever you call now clicks, likes, in social media? This is very interesting for career journalists because our media essentially, we are polarized, or not the right word, but dominated by politics, crime, sports, cinema. I think in India now we have a combination of cricket, cinema, and politics. So these three will give enough for the day for most of the people. But I would like to assure you that it's not completely true. Good science stories also get a lot of eyeballs or a lot of attention. Very recently, you had the GSLV launch. The number of people who watched this live is amazingly very high. And on the same day, India defeated Pakistan. I think in one of the best matches as far as cricket lovers would think. Last ball, 8 balls, 28 runs, and so on. Now, if you look at the viewership or following for these two stories, the cricket story anyway won hands down because of its following. But the story of GSLV, ISRO launching GSLV and India getting into a situation where it can launch heavier satellites, take on perhaps, SpaceX, Elon Musk SpaceX in near future. That also got lot of coverage and front page story. So there is hope that a good science story will give you front page. Today, the situation has dramatically changed, according to me, in favor of good science stories, unlike when we started. And some of my defense friends, I would like to tell you that missile being launched was front page story. But an Indian scientist, coming up with a new process in industry was nowhere in the sixth page or eighth page or so on, or any of the Department of Science projects, or something in agriculture. They were all inside. But Agni launch, every Agni launch used to be on page 1. Every space launch used to be on page 1. But what made the science journalism more important, more impactful, and more closer to all of us is COVID-19, which is my second example I want to quickly share with you. COVID-19 has dramatically changed, the way communication is practiced today, the way we write, the way we talk, the way we are confronted with information, fake news, videos, and so on. So during COVID-19, many things have happened. Every one of us went indoors, except for doctors, except for a few medical professionals. But the scientific world had a big challenge on their hand, and they had to develop drugs or vaccines. In the media world, most journalists became health and science writers. So guy who was covering crime also was asked to go to a hospital, doctor, talk to somebody and write. So most of the journalists today, practicing journalists, have some form of, reporting on health matters, health and related science. Similarly, medical fraternity, I think most doctors, whether they were a neurologist, a gynecologist, a gastroenterologist, all of them started treating COVID. And if you watch television, the heart specialist, the gastroenterologist, they were all on television explaining about COVID-19. Now, according to you, please tell me who was the right person to explain about COVID-19 and this subject. Which specialization? Pulmonology, lungs. That is only one aspect. Who? Epidemiology. Next. Virology. Okay. Okay. So you have a pulmonologist, you have an epidemiologist, you have a virologist. Now there is another subject called public health. You heard about it? Public health. Huh? In preventive medicine. Now, these are actually the people, a virologist, preventive medicine chap, public health specialist. These were the people who were supposed to talk. But I think, every other person started talking because there was lack of information. Now, coming to science and population, there were two things which dominated the entire discourse and work for at least 1 year. You leave aside the sociological aspect of people suffering, hospitals, all this. These are all regular stories. But one was vaccine, the another was drug. And I think many of you who are in Hyderabad, I think should feel very fortunate, like journalists like me, because in vaccine development, Hyderabad played an important role. Can anybody tell me, who are the one? How many vaccine makers are there in Hyderabad? Dr. Reddy's. Bharat Biotech, I heard. Serum Institute is not here. Pune. Okay. The Hyderabad, if you had heard our minister, would always say it's a vaccine hub of India, and then we would like to claim many things. He claimed very high and did get a lot of attention to Hyderabad because we have Bharat Biotech, we have Shanta Biotech, which has been taken over by Sanofi, and it's now owned by a French company. Then we have Biological Events, which makes vaccines. It is the first company in private sector in India to make vaccines. Biological Events, biologically it's called. Then you have National Immunology, National Institute of, this NDTB's Immunology Institute here, Indian Immunologicals Limited. Now they also make vaccines. Then you had, as she said, Dr. Reddy's, Aurobindo, several people got into vaccine making. So the story that we had was, now in India, we started making vaccines through the DNA route. The Americans, the Europeans, the other nations started making vaccines using, as we discussed earlier, the mRNA route. So there was a very interesting race between, our scientists in India, then global scientists, who will make this vaccine first? What is this vaccine about? And the entire story of vaccine development. I think earlier we took it for granted that, we got our kids polio vaccine and, all 5 vaccines before the age of 4. It was all very taken for granted, other than Amitabh Bachchan, coming and putting a polio drop or something like that. So the entire media had opportunities here to report from day one on how a vaccine is developed. So you had a very interesting exercise on, can a vaccine be developed in 1 year? Has a vaccine ever been developed in 1 year? So you had at one side the companies explaining to you that they are doing it on a fast track. Then you had on the other side scientists would say, no, it's not possible. You cannot make it. You have to do lot of trials. And in vaccine development, you have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, all these studies, which will take a long time. Now, what has science shown us in the last 1.5 years is something, again, very interesting for science journalists to take note of. We did not realize, and our minds are stuck to certain classical principles that a drug has to be done in this form. That is true. Like we talk about journalism, we always need to use the 5 W's and H. I think you're all familiar about the 5 Ws and H. Now, even today, the 5 Ws and H have to be followed. But the way you do or the way you narrate the story is changed because of the medium. Similarly, in vaccine development, the change that came about was that instead of a linear exercise, there was a method of doing parallel processing. As computers, you had these computers which were built according to the speed of their crunching. It went up to a supercomputer. So the supercomputer was size of a room actually when it was developed. But then they developed parallel processing, and the supercomputer became silicon graphics developed on your desktop. So the ability to build building blocks, integrate them, and multiply is something which in the development of vaccines, it was demonstrated. As the development happened, the scientific papers were published, the regulator was brought in, the parallel evaluation and analysis was done, and the data was crunched faster because of the power of the machines that we have. So the entire process was accelerated. Now, for learning, for writing on science, so we were all exposed to all these new things, and at different stages we could write, we could report. There are a lot of questions, of course, that you should not do it at such speed. Then, you should not experiment directly on humans. There were cases of, negative effect of the vaccine and how the body will react. So the whole lot of ideas to do stories were generated during this development of vaccines. And I'm sure any working journalist is there, he or she would have written about this vaccine. And in these 2 years, if you look at all news platforms, all television channels, all newspapers have given so much of coverage to COVID that, even today, if you produce a good story, it will come on page 1. Now, the good part is that the number of cases, fatalities, and all have gone inside. And any new development, if there's a nasal vaccine or if there is a more improved vaccine, you will get it on page 1. So the big lesson that COVID-19 has taught is that, in addition to the rapidity, pace, the power, and the rate at which science and technology is progressing, we need to also, as media professionals, report, look at all these, question the methodologies, source our stories, and present it well. And if you look at the new medium, I think got a bit stuck to traditional media. But if you look at the new media like YouTube's, then online medium, even our WhatsApp University, as they call, you see some of the widely followed, widely seen, widely circulated or forwarded are all stories concerning COVID-19. But the big challenge that this entire COVID-19 has brought in front of us is the misinformation. I would not call fake news, but fake information, because if it is news, then it cannot be fake, because news is fact. So you cannot have fake news, according to me, because news is real and true. So it's no fake news. So misinformation, wrong stories and all got circulated because everybody started explaining how it can be cured, or how your immunity can be built, how Ayurveda helps, how homeopathy helps. All kinds of things were explained, which brings me to the opportunities that journalists today have, because many of my friends, where students also think that journalism is now in the dumps, print media is going to die, journalists are not paid much, journalists are not able to write good stories. There is no freedom of speech. You can't write. If you write a lot of negative stories, you will be behind bars. So there are a lot of things that are confronting, especially the young students. But I would like to tell you that the modern technology and the new ways of communicating have opened up a lot of opportunities for journalists. For example, earlier I used to write in the Hindu. I used to meet a scientist. I would come back. I would write a story and wait for it to be published. It would take 1 day, 2 days, because the story is not good. The paper will not publish. It will take 2 days. Now you can meet a person, write a story immediately for your paper because it is online. The other main story will come next day. You can use your own social media handles. You can put it on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and any way you want to communicate. If your publication allows, you can do it. If you are a freelancer like me, so I can immediately do multiple things with the same information and become more known. Then the amount of information that you gather can be shared very easily. I'll tell you a very interesting example. In 1983, when I started my career, I had a great opportunity to meet a would-be Nobel laureate. A would-be Nobel laureate. I was covering an event in the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology, CCMB. It was RRL at that time, RRL. A scientist by name, Dr. Caesar Milstein, came to give a lecture. Now I went there. There was Dr. Bhargava, who is a very good science communicator and science administrator. Now he spoke for 1 hour on a subject called monoclonal antibodies. Any of you are familiar? You should be because of COVID. Huh? Monoclonal antibodies. For me, that was entire Greek and Latin. That entire 45 minutes was Greek and Latin because I had never heard of monoclonal antibodies in my life. I had heard about this gentleman for the first time. There was no Google. There was nothing other than 3 paras written about him and given to me. After 1 hour, 15 minutes, I went and asked a few scientists. They said, we cannot explain much because what he has done is very pioneering work and we are also learning. So then I asked Dr. Bhargava. He said, you better talk to him. Because I had to produce a story because I was in an agency which people were dependent on us for stories. So I went to him and said, I would like to ask you a few more questions because I never understood much. He was going away in the same evening to Delhi and then back. So Dr. Bhargava told me, the only way is you sit with him in the car, go to the airport, and that is, you left it to me. So I went from, I think, a few kilometers from here, the lab, to Begumpet Airport, which is 6-7 kilometers. Another half an hour I discussed with him, and to be honest, I did not understand much. But I had to do a story. Now, I did a story of, say, 350 words, and the newspapers published 150 words. Because I did not understand, sub-editor did not understand, the other fellow did not understand. The only news point was monoclonal antibodies, and in that story, to my complete lack of understanding, I had quoted Dr. Bhargava and said in that, they had told in the introduction that this work was so great that the magazine by name Nature, which was the best magazine, the editors of the magazine published only 6 paragraphs and said, we are publishing this because this is something which we do not know, but in the interest of science and knowledge, we are publishing this in the form of a letter in Nature. And Dr. Bhargava was telling that this man might win a Nobel Prize. So these were the two news points in addition to whatever he said, vote of thanks and, all that I wrote. Now, in 1984, to my utter shock, he won the Nobel Prize. Just, I think, 8-9 months later. Cesar Milstein, George Kohler, and another person. Three of them won the Nobel Prize for monoclonal antibodies. Now, in 1987, the lab was inaugurated, CCMB. At that time, George Kohler, who was the second one to win the Nobel Prize, he had come to CCMB. Now, by then, I started understanding a bit more of science. So when he came here, I talked to him and wrote, again, not much about monoclonal antibodies because there's no application and all. But I could write about this German chap who was just 37 when he won the Nobel Prize. Now, what he did was, he took a map of Hyderabad. Okay, he was staying in a hotel in Banjara Hills. So he said, I will take a bicycle, use the map and come to CCMB and give a lecture. So he started from his hotel with the map, and many people were waiting in the afternoon for him. 1.5 hours before lunchtime, he never appeared. So they were all worried, what happened, so there were no mobiles, nothing. So they called landline to the hotel. The hotel fellow said he has already left. So the worry was because he was a Nobel laureate. So they complained to the police. And the police saw him in Mushirabad with a map on a bicycle searching. So they, tracked him and then brought him here and he gave a lecture. So how do you write stories when you don't understand and all that? So what I did was I used this human interest story of how a Nobel laureate, lost his way in Hyderabad in spite of a map. Now you look at maps being very scientifically produced, and then a scientist who's supposed to be logical now uses his logic and science and ends up 8 kilometers away from the destination. Now then you use that, and then again wrote about monoclonal antibodies, how they were promising a lot, how they would help in disease prevention and all that. Now finally, in 2020, okay, when these treatments for COVID were being tried out, one of the big company, I think Merck, produced this one-shot drug using monoclonal antibodies. In Hyderabad, it was sold at 65,000 rupees for one shot, a monoclonal antibody treatment. Now, I have written five articles on monoclonal antibodies. The reason is, I wanted to tell you the long story, is you met somebody who was such a great person, and as a journalist, you could hardly write 300 words in one era. A decade later, you again met, but you did not have the tools, recording tool. You did not have Google. You did not have experts to explain. So you have written, say, a 500-word article. Today, you meet a Nobel laureate. I bet if you're creative, you can write an article, you can do a YouTube on him, you can put it online, you can again, do a one-on-one interview. So you can generate a lot of stories because you have access to information, you have technology, you have tools, and so on. So as a journalist, as a communicator, what I want to tell you is the scope is tremendous. You can produce and make it exciting. You can add a lot of value to this story from different sources. Now you can ask somebody in Hyderabad or any laboratory what the implication of these monoclonal antibodies, what this work is, what is the work of this scientist, how impactful it is. So the scope for communicating, writing stories is tremendous. And as I was discussing, will science communication give you money? will science communication give you satisfaction? Or through science communication, will you be able to contribute something? So, depending on your profession, or if it's a hobby to write, or as some of my scientists, try to use science popularization to help society, you can play multiple roles by, better communication and using all these tools to communicate. And finally, I think before I finish, I think I have already taken a lot of time. Climate change is something which, I urge all of you to take seriously, because climate change, when I started journalism, was something like science fiction. We thought it is a million years away, or, it's all related about far away things. But climate change has become very real, according to me. So you need to look at the implications of climate change on many, many areas. So you will be able to write a lot of stories on climate change related issues. And the most recent that we have all suffered is the rains in urban areas, including Hyderabad. Why the rainfall pattern has been changing the way it is. You have an episode of, in 1 hour, some 15 to 20 centimeters of rain falling in some areas within 24 hours, which is very unheard of. Then, instead of rain, the southwest monsoon being spread from June to September, you have the entire rainfall pattern changing. There's too much of rain during, say, August end. So how farmers are affected in their, rain-dependent agriculture. Similarly, how this, climate is, changing the biodiversity, and how it's impacting, our immunity, weather patterns, and so on. So I request all of you to take climate change as an important subject to learn and keep writing. And finally, to summarize, I would leave you on a very positive note that communication as a skill has a tremendous scope for any of you to make a career, make name, make money, or whatever, because good communication reaches more people today. 20 years ago, we wrote an article in the Hindu. The Hindu had 24 pages. I was writing on science. Science was in one portion of the, 5 lakh people. The people interested in reading in science perhaps was 5,000. Out of the 5,000, I don't know whether 1,000 understood. 1,000 people communicating to another 3,000. That was your world of impact. But today, you write a good story. I found through my own social media handles, somebody in, Uzbekistan to Pakistan, responding. So you write a good story, it is widely circulated, you get connected, you can reach, more places through writing, more places through talking and communication. It's a very, very exciting world. The limitation is only in your creativity and thinking. I would not discount that money is good, career is good, promotions are all good, but please go beyond this, because you can write content, you can communicate and create a lot of things which will help you in a solid career. Thank you very much for the patient hearing.
So we'll take few questions.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, please. Yeah, now it's a full presentation. So what we are discussing in the morning onwards, this is not academic workshop, definitely. Maybe we are dealing with certain discussions on academic aspects, but we have the social responsibility how to take the science to the public, needy people. That is the responsibility before all of us. Okay, you please interact with the SOWMYA garu. So if you have any,
if I can, I will.
yeah.
Sir, SOWMYA garu, your talk is actually fitting well to the object of this workshop. But of course, your presentation also is also very close to our conviction, personally also. But in one thing I would like to differ because being a person working in the course and also working among the young people who promote the scientific temper, I would like to differ in one thing. So that example, whatever you mentioned about the magnetic field effect on sleeping pose, no? I think I have answered that question in Hindu itself. Maybe I was one of the regular columnists in Hindu in Science Corner. About some 200 answers I gave. One of the questions was this: whether there will be any effect of sleeping postures north to south or east to west and all. And I told very huge magnetic field. Definitely there will be some kind of effect because there are a lot of magnetic molecules in our body. Cytochrome oxidase is there, hemoglobin is there, myoglobin is there, etc. But earth magnetism is so tiny that you cannot find any effect at all. It is only 0.2 Ga. Same way. So the magnetization amount is going to be same even if there is some tiny finite effect of this earth magnetic field. So there is no real converse effect of sleeping north to south when compared to east to west. Whether it is east to west or sleeping or northwest sleeping, the effect is same. Or hardly any difference is there. I would like to be very clear about it.
No, that's a very, I think, valid. Can you hear me? Yeah. I think that's a very valid question. You know, I perhaps should have taken it further. In fact, this was a study done by Russians and Indians. Okay. Now, the study was done in vacuum, where, you know, that large amount of magnetic waves were impinged on. But they could not take it further and, as you said, prove that it will have an impact when the weak magnetic field is there or the north and south magnetic poles impact. So this research did not go far in proving. And as you rightly say, whichever direction you sleep might not impact much. I just used it to say how you can relate it to your normal activities. But in fact, there is still work going on in that subject. It is not proven.
So, yeah.
One question, sir. Sir, there is a lot of brain drain in India. Young scientists and others who are studying in IITs and all, they're not contributing to our country, and they are going out and contributing to Western countries because of their pay packages and other things. And also with the recent limitation in which in English subjects and all, whatever higher studies one wants to do, those are available only in English medium. So what are your views to prevent brain drain in India, and how can we ensure that they get opportunities in India?
I think that's this is a question which has been plaguing India for the last 3-4 decades, I think. But one thing I think what you should understand in science especially is science is more international now. It is not very local. We should not look at it as a local thing. The one area where you should think local is using science to solve our problems. Okay, so that means you do internationally science with people in world over, but if you want to use science, then solve Indian problems, that is our problems, to using science. But if Indians are going away to the US or UK or anywhere, that reason is that it is better opportunities to do latest research or latest work. But I think the Department of Science and Technology, DBT, you know, they all have been trying to bring back scientists also. The experience, what I have and can tell you is, the reason for going off is not because of lack of facilities. I think it is a lack of the environment where you can do good work, good research. I think that is what is lacking. In India, if you look, I'll tell you one more example of this CCMB. So when CCMB was inaugurated in 1987, there were 5 Nobel laureates. One of them was Dr. Francis Crick, who, you know, the DNA double helix molecule they explained. Now, when he saw the facilities, he, said, I am really amazed that you have such wonderful facilities in CCMB in 1987. So I did not realize much. In 1988, for the first time in my life, I went abroad. I went to Paris. And in Paris, there is a research institute called the Pasteur Institute. Now, I went to Pasteur Institute. To my utter shock, I found that institute like a college laboratory, which is 3 times better than a college laboratory. It was half this building stage, and very ordinary facilities were there at that time, 87. Now, that institute produced 8 Nobel laureates. Okay, but the scientists there were all very good. The environment was good. The motivation levels were higher. So I think in India, what is lacking is that kind of an environment for research, motivation, and the recognition for scientists. Today, if a scientist does good work, as a journalist, will I put it on page 1? Will all of you as a society or a club call him and honor him? Will somebody give him a prize? In fact, our government has recently, I think, proposed to scrap 300 awards for scientists. If it happens, 300 awards are gone for scientists. But, I would like to quote one of our great diplomats called Abid Hussain. He used to be an excellent speaker. Pre-lunch, he would speak well. Post-lunch, he would not allow you to sleep. Pre-dinner, he would sleep well with his excellent presentation. So he was asked this question during the 90s when he was, I think, ambassador to US from India. He said, what is your view on, no, he was Commerce Secretary. So at that time, we were importing a lot of liberalization happened during Rajiv Gandhi's time. So this question was asked. So he said, my dear friends, it is better to have brain drain than brains in the drain. Okay. But today, I think, let us be practical, that you can sit here and you can work with somebody in the US and produce a wonderful paper. So let any people who are interested go do wonderful work and then solve problems. If it helps us, better. If not, globally it will be, useful, because immediately we will get it. Any technology anywhere, it's easily available. So I would rather prefer people going wherever they are, liking what they do and produce something than, sitting in a laboratory here and going off at 5 o'clock and not producing anything.
Yes. Any more?
I think
Yeah.
you can ask whatever you want. Don't hesitate. As a journalist, I told you my own experience. Asked the stupidest question possible, and right, because science is something completely evolving. It is not like politics where you know something in advance.
Yeah.
My question is an extension of Sir's question. You said
Yeah.
it's okay. You said you wrote that story, connect with grandma. So if we read a science story like that, people will think every grandma story have an scientific explanation. But most of the grandma stories are superstitious. So is it right to write science stories connected to this kind of grandma tales?
No. I think I used a grandma because in Indian tradition, the most important things we understand is home remedies, our grandma tales, our ability to learn by stories told over generations. So I only used it in that format. And as journalists for a long time, we were told that the story you write should be understood by your grandmother. which means our grandmother was not illiterate in English or science and all that, but she was worldly wise. Now, when you write a story, it should be so simple that she also should understand. Now, when you as a journalist write, what I used to do is, I used to narrate this to my family members and ask whether they understood. Now, if they don't understand, then there's no point in writing for a larger audience. So you have to change. So my reference is to make the thing simple. Now, the second part, you're right. Many of what grandmothers say, or some of the things which we are writing on WhatsApp also border on make-believe, fake, and superstition. Now, our job as journalists is to question this and prove that it has some basis. That's why I told you before writing, you please look at whether it is published, whether it is sourced, whether it can be, sampled to another word and explain. Now, if all three are not available, like COVID vaccines, mRNA, whether it is, whether it is going to be effective or not, then you say that this is what the scientists have claimed themselves. You use claim in the story. So our job as science writers is not to carry superstition, make believe, or replace believe it or not further, but to demystify our science. So in demystification, I suggested that you use certain things which make it simple. But I'm not propagating that you, in trying to demystify, you create further mystery. No. So the entire intent is to make it simple and understandable. That should be the spirit. That is why a grandma is used. So if you write a story and your colleague doesn't understand, does it make any sense to that others will understand?
I have. So this is all the. Sometime back I visited USA, one of the chemistry laboratories. There they are measuring. There they were measuring the reactions that are happening at femtosecond time scale. Femtosecond means 10 to the power of minus 15 seconds. And if you imagine such type of sensitive measurements, I was thinking that there must be a big mission to measure all that activity. And when I went and visited the laboratory, there is a long table from there to here. There are some lenses, some mirrors, etc. Ultimately, only one laser source. Laser source is there. He started measuring the action at the end. Nothing, everything is arranged on the table. Now, why I am giving this example is where to make what to make good science in India.
Where to make good science?
Good science.
I think science can be two ways. One is, serendipity, as they call. You're walking around, you find something interesting, then you work on it and develop something. There are some, many examples of how people like from Newton, the apple falling, he got this great idea. To, some people who have seen, while in their morning walk, some flower which gives some very interesting scent. And then, that scientist got excited, he worked on it, extracted a molecule and made a drug. So there are things which happen to them. Or I think you, in a laboratory, you work on a challenge to find a solution and then, develop some technology or technique that will help. So I don't think a big air-conditioned hall or an auditorium, five-star, laboratory or a college lab, they all might matter in the comfort of working, but not on the thinking, I think. So the thinking needs to be what is to be stimulated. That kind of environment you require. And modern science definitely requires a lot of machines, lot of equipment to carry it forward. Say, for example, the 2022 Nobel Prize winner in medicine, the Swedish gentleman. Now, he has found a DNA sample of Neanderthal man or before. Then he has used DNA technology to decipher and build his entire genome. Then he linked that person or that human called Denisovan. Okay. From there to Neanderthal to Homo sapien. Now he has linked their genomes. So he has worked from a discovery which accidentally happened in Siberia to an organized genomic sequencing to link our ancestry. And I don't think it required any great facility other than rapidly sequencing.
Just you made a comment at the beginning about the Jan Vijnana Vedika and the fish medicine campaign, for which Dr. P.M. Bhargava is very much associated exposing this one. So as you said, during that media also, whenever that Mirgashira Karte comes,
Yeah.
so all sorts of things will come. The media, anyway, JVV people questioned it. Really, if it works well against the asthma, why only in Hyderabad? Let our people who are suffering from throughout the country, why only in India, throughout the world? Why can't they use that medicine, whatever so-called medicine, they will put it in the mouth of the fish and the whole fish is supposed to be swallowed by the patient. So there is no, it will work only on that day, it will work only in Hyderabad, that too in public. So there should be some sense. Many times the media use it because of he is giving poor medicine, why these people are opposing. Not the question of giving freely. Can you, for example, I can say, I have a medicine to control cure. I will give a small pellets of small stones. I have a belief it will control the cancer. Can you allow? Just like that. So many times the journalists also, no. Unless he is giving freely, that too it is a practice for more than 100 years. Why they are making it an issue? Finally, it went to the level of High Court, even Dr. Bhargava also. Really, if it works well, we ourselves I will go to DST and other. No, you should make it available throughout the country. Finally, they are sent to the laboratories, nothing of that sort. No ingredient is involved in that medicine that will leave alone the prevention. It will reduce the asthma. There is nothing like that. So suddenly they changed it, instead of medicine, prasadam. Anyone can have the prasadam. So it is a belief. Now it is going on in the name of prasadam, only few people. As he said, another this thing. So sometimes, as he said, brain drain is better than brain going into the drain. So we, as a JVV, organized a meeting with the Nobel laureate. Again, Indian born only we should say. Nobel laureate means Raman is no more. So whenever you say living Nobel laureate means Indian born Nobel laureate is a Britisher and American, the living one, Dr. Venkat Raman Ramakrishnan. We arranged a meeting to discuss about the science, why Indian scientists are not getting the second Nobel Prize after Raman. To discuss about the science, why Indian scientists are not getting the second Nobel Prize after Raman. When is the year? More than 95 years back. That is the only one. Still we will claim we got one Nobel Prize. I don't know. In our lifetime, we may or may not see the second Nobel Prize in the science. Wherever he is telling, wherever I go, the first question posed to him, why is India is failed to get the second Nobel Prize in the science? He said, when we organized that meeting, I am expecting this question from the audience. So I am expecting this question from the audience. Can you make small favor by arranging a 3-minute video? You make some arrangement. I will screen that one. It will make my job easy to answer that question. Anyway, as expected by him, many people, because he is being a Nobel laureate, so that question came and he showed that is a 2 minutes screening when Watson, one who discovered the double helical structure of DNA, that is the media interview of the Dr. Watson's. So same thing, at that time during DNA technology, everybody is giving importance. I have not done a major discovery, but just is a coincidence. Again, Dr. Ramakrishnan said, so you are great, you have done a wonderful job. He said in a polite way, there are many top Indian scientists. If I compare the work of there and with one, they are really very negligible. He gave so many examples. Satish Dhawan, Homi Baba, many people. Sometimes, it will go. Don't think that just because I received the Nobel Prize, you should not put it. And finally, he gave one good example. He visited the same CCMB that you are mentioning before receiving the Nobel Prize. 2008 last. He received the Nobel Prize in the year 2009 in chemistry, along with 3 other people. So when he addressed the scientists of CCMB, in a jocular way telling, there are hardly 2 rows are full in the auditorium. Just 2 rows. He is just Venkataraman at that time. He came in the 2010 after receiving the Nobel Prize. So nearly 2,000 people, the hall capacity is 320 or 40. The craze given to the award, it is common everywhere. He is telling, don't think just by receiving, because there is a great honor for it, but it doesn't mean that one who received the Nobel Prize is very great, and those who are not getting, this is the clear, that is the experience of this. That's what I want.
Okay, sir. Okay. So we had a good interaction. Anyhow, we are waiting for lunch. Now I invite Professor Stevenson to say a vote of thanks for this talk.
Well, I take this opportunity to thank Mulugu Somashekar. Incidentally, he was my senior in Nizam College, a senior in the profession also, a proud alumnus of the Department of Journalism. I think I've been a keen follower of his writings. Okay, he has been a great supporter of the department. Okay, whenever we invite him for any such workshops, I think he says, I'd love to come to the department anytime. Okay, not only he, but his entire class. Okay, they make it a point to be present and help the department. Thank you very much, Som, for your very enlightening speech. In the sense, I think we have enough food for thought. Okay, he has covered a lot of ground, talking about the scope of communication, the opportunities, okay, the challenges. Okay, even if you are not a science graduate, how we could make stories out of certain incidents which he had come across. Okay, how you should be aware about your own surroundings, trying to talk about the number of scientific institutions in and around Hyderabad. I think that is something we need to understand. We need to be aware about our surroundings, who are the people who are available for us as sources. Okay, he also touched upon the latest trends, okay, disinformation, fake news, how we have to guard against these things and be more what we call interrogative and questioning spirit, okay, which is a must for all journalists where we are looking at evidence-based journalism. On behalf of the department and HCDC, I would just like to present a small memento to Som, because that is how we call him. Okay, thank you very much, Som, once again. Yeah. Lunch is ready. I think we just have lunch here.
So 45 minutes break for lunch and we will come back again.